Hey y'all, hope you're doing well. I want to talk for just a second about the Sanctuary of School, and that is the paper that you had to take a test on or a quiz on just the other day. So I want to talk about it for just a second. I wanted to show you what I annotated because I think there are some points in here that are really important. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm looking at that first paragraph, and one thing that I will say, for your paper, I really do need you to have more of an introduction. So this one, it seems like it starts right on the action, and so Miss Hunter would say, yikes, I don't love that. But, I do think this is still a beautifully written story, so it just doesn't follow all the conventions I set out for you. So then I want to talk, obviously this is a narrative, and it's a narrative because it's a story about our narrator's life. And so we kind of assume that it's a first person, this is her story kind of narrative. Okay? So, and I don't really think there's much of a thesis here, so I think it's an implied thesis, which I think whenever we get a little bit more sophisticated in our writing, we can do more playing around like this, because I really do feel like this was a great story then. So obviously this is a story about this poor little girl who is suffering from child abuse in the form of neglect. And so it doesn't say that anybody really physically abuses her. More, they just ignore her. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I think one of the things I highlighted was beautiful imagery and reflection. Those are two things that I thought were really important. And one of the things that she mentions here is she talks about little kids who feel panic when they're lost. And she seems like she's lost in her life. And so maybe it is the same panic. She's just, nobody's coming to save her, like her parents aren't coming to save her, and so she panics almost at that. So one of the other things that I really love about this is reflection. And so I want to show you this little line here where she says, in a perfect world, my absence from home would not have gone unnoticed. Think about that wording, because it's a double negative and it's totally weird, because really what she's saying, people would have noticed I was gone. But she says it this way, and it's the poetic kind of wording of that I really like. And then I also like her description of her parents. She said instead she had two parents in a panic to locate the answer to the hard question of survival during a deep financial and emotional crisis. And so I look at this and I think she's kinder to her parents than I would have been, and that's what I put in my notes. She kind of realizes now what they were going through. They were poor. They were sad, and probably more than that, but that's all she tells us. So I think that it's interesting that that's how she looks back at her parents. Now, I want to go here first. She talks about Johnny Carson and how they had to watch the TV with the sound off. Right? So then she goes outside and she says that she can see the stars, and it looked like the world had the sound off. And then she comes down here on page 2 and she said we were children with the sound turned off. And just in case you're wondering, that's probably my favorite description. And she returns to this idea of sound being turned off. And I think that's really important because she's a kid that nobody hears. Nobody hears that they're sad. Nobody hears that they're scared. Nothing. And so they just have no sound at all. And they don't hear when they're happy either. So, and this part, to me, I thought was just terribly sad. I have a 3-year-old, so I was obviously just picturing her sweet little sad face. So that made me really sad. But this poor little girl who just goes up to the teacher and she cries, and we don't know why. And then she says she was crying from relief. And she was crying from the relief of stability and warmth and somebody who was happy to see her. And so she saw school as a lifeline. Without that, she just wouldn't have anywhere to go. And I think about that, and I think it's so sad. And then I think about it again in COVID times, which I think is even more important, because we do have so many kids that may not have a place to go right now, from who could be in the same situation. Okay? I think this is a little bit of reflection here. She learned to build myself a life preserver with art. Okay, so now though, at the bottom, and we're at the bottom of page 2, so there's not much left of this story at this point, but she does start to make a point here, and I wonder if, conventionally for me, I might have liked it better had she put this first. But basically what she does here is she starts to talk about the education system and how it's underfunded, teachers aren't paid enough, art, music, all these things that really helped her. they're just underfunded is basically what she's saying. And so her point here is that that education is not being funded enough. And so she talks to, and I want to make sure that you got this reference, but and I think about this because it was written in 1992, so it's a little bit old. But so we're told that public schools aren't important. And I think one of the things that's interesting, we leave them to learn from the blind eye of television or the mercy of 1,000 points of light. And so if you read this and you didn't understand what it was talking about, it's talking about a George H.W. Bush speech. And basically, the 1,000 points of lights were volunteers. And so basically, she's saying we're left at the mercy of volunteers whenever probably education should be funded, is basically what she's saying there. And then she says she was lucky. And so, really by the time it's over, she wants a country that will step up and fund education so that kids like herself won't find themselves in the same situation, or will find themselves in the same situation with that life preserver instead of just out there alone. And so when we look at this narrative, it has a point. I think it has amazing reflection. I like a lot of the description in here. But I do think that comes with practice. I mean, this lady's obviously like a famous writer. This was in the New York Times. So keep that in mind, that I couldn't write anything this good. So, so anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on that. And that's it. Y'all have a good day. Bye.